I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Harry Segel.
And welcome to another episode, another session of Shrinking Trump.
John and I are both clinical psychologists, and John became aware really 6 or 7 years ago of Trump's malignant narcissism. That's what we call a severe personality disorder, which explains Trump's illegal behavior, lack of empathy, compulsive lying. But Trump has also been suffering from the early signs of dementia, which has limited his cognitive flexibility, often leads him to misspeak in strange ways, what John and I and other clinicians call phonemic paraphasias, where someone can't quite finish saying a word that they've started to say. It's also affected his physical gait and the complexity of his thinking. And even though John and I might have political views about what Trump and his party have to offer, as clinicians, we have been extremely frightened, I would say, scared to death, really, of someone with this pathology getting back into the White House and having such an impact on the country and the world. So, John, how do you think we've been doing?
Well, I think that the data is proving us correct. And speaking of data, I just want to let people know about our guest that's coming up at the end of the hour, Dr. Ben Michaelis. What's interesting is he was participated in 2 stat articles, one from a number of years ago and one more recently, where they looked at speeches of Trump when he was younger and more currently to see if they could document cognitive decline. And they had 4 different experts look at those speeches and come to some conclusions. So this really is a small N clinical experiment. And we're going to hear directly from Dr. Michaelis in terms of what they found. But it is, to tease it a little bit, consistent with our hypotheses. But the other thing that we want to talk about today is we've been talking about how George Conway's anti-psychopath and also the Lincoln Project have been microbeaming their commercials, their provocative commercials, into Mar-a-Lago and into Bedminster. And so I actually mentioned this with regard to George. I had not mentioned it with regard to the Lincoln Project, but some people brought it up. But it's true. The Lincoln Project has been doing it also. I did mention that to George. And actually, he said that he did give Rick Wilson the idea, just for the record, because he said, and this is interesting, remember, George has seen Trump up close. His wife was his campaign manager. So he really has had a very intimate view of Trump. And he said, I've just had this theory for all these years that we can provoke him into betraying himself and displaying himself because he is so easily provoked, like a little 3-year-old bully. So more proof that it's working. Trump's lawyer sent a cease and desist letter to the Lincoln Project, threatening to sue them if they didn't stop beaming their commercials into his club. Here is the Lincoln Project's response.
The Donald Trump for President campaign hit a bunch of people this afternoon with cease and desist letters because our ads were too mean for little Donald.
Again, Donald?
Poor little baby Donald got very upset because our ads were mean to him.
This is the 3rd time you've threatened to sue the Lincoln Project.
They should call it the Losers Project.
This time it's because we told you the truth about how your campaign was failing, broken, and dead in the water.
Wrong that you have the race sewn up. It's sad, Donald.
We told you Chris and Susie made a mistake when they bragged that Biden would stay in the race. It's embarrassing, Donald. Your whole campaign is a hot mess. You're terrible on camera these days. You just look old, tired, and fucking crazy.
The late great Hannibal Lecter.
America's just done with you, Donald. And with the political team you have,
I read it.
There's nothing you can do but lose, lose, lose.
It's not fair.
They're so mean. I love it.
It's interesting because what Kamala Harris does when she's attacked, really even more viciously, if you ask me, she's been attacked on race. He calls her stupid. He calls her garbage. She just shrugs and says, well, that's undignified. But you see, right. Trump can't respond that way. He has
can't
to
not react.
He
and
has
guess
to
what?
react.
He has to react. And so that's something you can count on. right? In some sort of martial art, right? If you can get your opponent to react and you know you can do it, right? Then he betrays himself. Then he reveals himself, and then he's off balance, and then he's on defense. And that's exactly what's happened. But one of the things I'm so excited about is it's not just George Conway, it's not just the Lincoln Project. Guess who else has discovered the value of this strategy? The Kamala Harris campaign. Let's look at, they have done brilliantly with their social media, and they have gotten the message that this works. Let's see the latest quote tweet of Trump's post. So Donald Trump posted, "We had to turn away lots of people yesterday in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, but Comrade Kamala Harris's social media operation showed empty seats long before the rally started, early in the afternoon, when in actuality we had to turn away 11,500 people." But Kamala HQ reposted that, and they said, "No, Donald, we posted a video of your empty rally while you were speaking. Americans are tired of your lies and slur-filled delusions. It's getting old." Because remember, he's so sensitive about his crowd size. And they included a video.
Thank you, God. Thank you, God. New York, Broome County, PA, Paul Battisti. Thank you, God.
Who are you going to believe? Your lying eyes, John.
Right. Who are you going to believe, the liar or your lying eyes? So, but look at how quick they are, okay? How deft they are, all right? They post something making fun of his crowd size. He posts something, "Oh, they're lying. That was in the stadium before I even got there." And they go, no, Donnie, that was when you were talking and everyone was leaving. Here's the video. And so they're getting under his skin. He has, as we've talked about, severe crowd size envy, okay? Severe crowd size anxiety that we believe has actually morphed into crowd size delusion. So we're pushing him further and further into his disturbance about his crowd size inferiority. But you know what? Guess who else is teasing him about his crowd size? Even some of the people that you normally expect to go high.
There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes.
You see what he did there?
It's just,
yeah. Yeah. By the way, some people are only listening here. I just want to, for the people who are only listening, because the visual is so important, right? While Obama was talking about his obsession with crowd size, he held his hands together, right, and then brought them closer together, right, to indicate a small, weenie kind of crowd.
And actually, it's a move that Trump makes a lot when he's speaking
with his hands. That's right.
So he's also making fun of him. By the way, what a pleasure it was to hear Obama give a speech again, and I believe a really profound one. But you're right, John. They're not going high. They're going right at him.
That's right. Well, yeah. Rather than going high, I prefer to follow my my model Winston Churchill, who said, "We'll fight them in the beaches. We'll fight them in the streets. I mean, we'll fight them wherever they are." Is the point?
Yeah. No.
Well, speaking about crowd size, some of our viewers have sent us in some cartoons that I just wanted to show. So let's look at the first one. So for those of you who are just listening, there's a big Trump plane and there's a huge crowd outside of the airplane. And they go, "Wow, what a crowd. Kamala can't compete." But then someone else says, "Should we tell him those are the mental health professionals?"
I like that. Thanks.
And then,
whoever sent that in.
I would give them credit, but I honestly can't remember. But I do remember that the second one was sent in by a high school friend of mine, Ann Kaplan, who also was the head of Duty to Warn New York many years ago. So she really wanted us to put this on the show, but she didn't have to sell it. It's really a good one. Let's look at this. Now, for those of you who are just watching, who are just listening, Trump is on an analyst couch, and there's a Freudian-looking analyst behind him. And the analyst is saying to Trump, "These very large crowds, are they in the room with us right now?"
One thing I love it. I just want to make one point about this because It's not just that Trump reveals who he is if you attack him in this way. He does. He gets reactive. But I don't know if any of you out there have played chess. I think I worked at it for a year or two when I was in graduate school. I'm no chess player. But one of the things about chess that's so important is something called tempo. That is, you always have to be keeping the other player off balance.
Yes.
If you give the player a chance to respond and then put you off balance, they have the tempo, right? And so what the Lincoln Project and George Conway's anti-psychopath is doing is giving tempo to Kamala Harris, and they're jumping on it. So they're just pushing him back and pushing him back. As long as he's reacting, he's losing.
Right. Exactly. And as long as he's defending himself, he's losing. Right. And one of the other areas in which he's feeling very defensive is being called weird. You know, for 7 years, we've been, as mental health professionals, we've been trying to sell the world on the fact that Donald Trump has a personality. We could have just called him weird. Because weird is working, folks. All right. And guess who else is pushing weird? The mean people at the Lincoln Project.
These people are eccentric, offbeat, maybe a little kooky. Yeah, they're oddballs. Not quite normal, but hey, it's America. We're okay with that. But this guy is weird in a bad way.
If you look at Martin Luther King, when he did his speech, we actually had more people.
Weird in a creepy way.
You're going up the escalator? I'm going to be dating her in 10 years.
I've said that if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.
Weird in a dangerous way.
In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Just weird.
Don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird?
99% of the things I'm saying are common sense.
Too weird to be president.
These guys are creepy and yes, just weird as hell.
A lot of talent and a lot of skill being put into these ads, I think.
That's a good point. I'm glad you say that, because these people are working really, really hard. And the people who work with, George Conway, especially Barry Rubin, a shout out, who makes the ads. It really is a talent, and they put a lot of work into it. Well, the work is worth it, because guess what? He just can't stand people calling him weird. It's driving him batty. And, one of the problems with having to defend yourself against these things, if you're defending yourself, you're losing, right? So let's hear Donald Trump explaining how he's not weird. I'm not weird.
See it a little bit by this whack job. He said, we're weird. That JD and I are weird. I think we're extremely normal people. Like you, exactly like. He's weird. Did you ever see him go on the stage and go like crazy? It's like, between his movement and her laugh, there's a lot of craziness. I'd say a step further than weird. Weird is a nice word by comparison.
I'm not weird. You're weird.
See, it's a very weak response.
Very weak.
Very weak response. And again, he's off balance, because Trump is usually, in at least a few years ago, he would have been much, much tougher in his response.
Well, that's true. He's also lost a step.
He's declined a lot, actually, a lot. And that's where you see that lack of flexibility in his cognitive functioning.
Because normally he always goes totally on offense. And here he's clearly on defense. Well, look, we've talked about how they keep trying to project onto Kamala and to Walz the weird label, right? So, because, that's somehow Donald Trump has gotten through life with 1 3rd grade defense. It's I'm not the puppet, you're the puppet. And he was good. Somehow he was good at it. Just saying you're the puppet somehow won. But now it's sounding weak, as you say. I don't want to embarrass my stepson, but there's a story that we tell in my family about my stepson. If you know him, he's a very, very nice person. Okay, that's really important to know. So he was being bullied in 3rd grade at his Hebrew day school by some ruffian named Zachary, And, he was trying to come up with a comeback to push Zachary in his place. He said, Zachary Packery. It was a very weak response. And the only reason I know this story is because my wife insists on telling it over and over again. I'm sure he wants to die every time she tells it, wish he would stop telling it, and certainly wouldn't want me telling it on the air. But it's that feeling of a weak response. It's a weak comeback. It doesn't feel like a comeback. It feels like a fall down.
Look, there's only two comebacks to a bully, right? One is to act like you don't care at all. Just so really. Mm-hmm. Or to come back with something devastating that they haven't thought of.
Right.
And that's what Trump can't do anymore. He can't do, well, he never could do the first one, but the second one, he's not doing well anymore.
No, it's just Zachary Packery.
But do you remember in that first debate with Hillary when she said something about what he would do if he was in charge of the Justice Department, and without a second break, he said, you'd be in jail? I mean, he was really effective. Let's not pretend this is the Trump of 2016 or even 2020. He's declined a great deal. That's why we're seeing him really kind of floundering, along with the attacks that are pushing him back and taking away the tempo.
That's a very good point. It's really an interaction effect. So let's look at another one of their failed attempts to say that Kamala is the awkward and weird one.
Okay.
Harris visited a Sheetz, which had been cleared prior to arrival, where she awkwardly bought Doritos, twice apparently. So, look, Harry, we've all had cringy, embarrassing moments in our life we can all identify. I mean, look, I'm sure you can remember the last time you were a little embarrassed buying a bag of Doritos. No, you can't, because there's nothing embarrassing about buying a bag of Doritos. What are they talking about? Right? It's just such a lame, it's Zachary Packery. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, if we want to talk about people being weird in retail establishments, let's see an example.
The zoo has come to town. Thank you for letting us come in here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm sorry, man. Okay, yeah. She doesn't want to be on film, guys, so just cut her out of anything. Appreciate that, man. I'm J.D. Vance. I'm running for vice president. Good to see you.
Okay.
How long are you working?
I've been here since the beginning of July.
Okay.
For this year.
Okay, good. How about you, sir?
Almost 2 years.
Okay, good. Just everything, yeah. I mean, a lot of glazed here, some sprinkle stuff, some of these cinnamon rolls, just whatever makes sense. How long has this place been around?
About 4 years.
About 4 years? Okay. How long have you been here?
A little over 6 months.
Okay, good.
So awkward. Now that's awkward.
I feel bad for him in this one. I do. I don't like JD Vance, but I mean, he's trying and he's failing terribly. They want nothing to do with him.
The first it begins with her saying, I don't want to be on camera. So she's already said, like, please don't include me in whatever it is you're doing right now. And he just sort of persists. So how long have you been working here?
And you know
obviously
what?
He doesn't care about any of these.
But John, when people do stuff like this, there's an advance crew. And usually the person, say Vance, would go and meet with everyone and say, do you want to be on camera? I just want to ask you some questions. What do you say? And if they all are like, we're Democrats, then you don't shoot that at that place. Right? I mean, that's the standard. It's standard advance work. So it's incompetent. And poor JD Vance was set up to have these people not like him.
Not what that reminded me of? I'm sure people can identify with this. When you go into a store with your dad, and he's overly familiar with the people across the counter, trying to make connection with them, you can see that they're bored and they just want to give him his, how long have you been working here at the donut shop? Well, what do you like? You're just going, Dad, please stop doing that. Just
John, I remember your father. He was like that.
So, like, I'm having post-traumatic stress disorder watching JD Vance in the donut shop.
I'm with you. I'm having it too.
Okay. Well, so let's look at another failed attempt to weirdify the normality of the Kamala Walz team. Totally not weird. Now, for those people who are just listening, I need to describe this picture to you. It's a picture of Doug Emhoff with his daughter, and she's hugging him. You can see she's putting her arm around his shoulder and pulling him in, and he's hugging her. It's a side-by-side picture, and his hand is kind of resting on her hip, and they're both looking, very happy and content. Totally not weird. Well, I can say that as a father of 3 daughters, that picture is totally not weird. There's nothing weird about that picture, right? Harry, you have a grown daughter. Is that a weird picture?
Oh, absolutely not. Haley would do that in a minute. That
Exactly.
would be great. Yeah.
So trying to make something to weirdify normality. Now let's go back to the RNC convention and see if we can see a different parent-child interaction that might qualify as weird. Now, for those of you who are listening, I'm really sorry you cannot possibly appreciate this. This is a montage of 5 pictures of Trump and Ivanka. In one, he's staring at her breasts. In another, he's kissing her on the lips. In another, he's got his hand on her upper buttocks and he's staring at her breasts. And in another one, he's just touching her breasts.
Listen, I'm laughing, but it's so disturbing, and it's so
disturbing.
And I when Trump was elected in 2016, there was like a one of these Twitter contests where you had to come up with 4 words to talk about how you were thinking about the Trump, and mine was secretly rooting for Ivanka, because I thought maybe she could balance Trump, or she couldn't do anything with him. The abuse that he put her through, he demanded that she get a face job, a breast job. I mean, he turned her into
with her breasts.
Well,
he seems to have a real preoccupation with her breasts. I mean, it just seems to be.
She's a for Trump, everybody's an object for pleasure or derision.
Yeah. Yes. And that is weird. That's weird.
Well, it's disturbed, because we're psychologists. We don't have to say weird. We can say disturbed because it's very disturbed.
Right. It's disturbed. It's weird because it's disturbed. Well,
right.
So Harry, you went picked out some choice low points of Donald Trump's Wilkes-Barre rally in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I as I often say in this show, that I watch the rallies so that you don't have to. And I have to say, this was a hard one to watch, and also, he does repeat a lot. I had a grandmother in her 90s who I think had her own narcissistic disorder, and also was declining in her 90s, and my grandmother, and she did it since she was a young woman, would just tell the same stories over and over again.
Sure.
And you'd have to wait and listen to them, because she wouldn't tolerate any break of attention. I discovered as a young man, because I really loved her, and I used to talk with her once a week on Sunday for like a couple hours. I used to do the dishes and stuff because she just talked. I'd always wait for the one story she had never told me.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be one story, and that would be the tell. That would be how she was really feeling. And now I'm discovering with Trump is that he's repeating the stuff, but it's when he has a variation or he inserts something new, you have a sense of really where his mind is, because he's relying on these kind of sort of strips of language and strips of stories that he's actually going to with more and more kind of randomness. So anyway, I tried to make some sense out of it.
But Harry, you do remember that you've told us that story before, right?
Did I say that story?
No, I'm just gaslighting you.
Oh, thank goodness I am not showing signs of dementia so far. And I'm reminded of a great comedian who was once talked about how terrified he was of getting Alzheimer's disease. So he baked a poison pie and left it in his refrigerator. You'll get it. All right, let's start with the first clip, Rex, if we can.
You know, they do polls and this stuff, and I'm at like 93%. I said, so why are we having an election? They didn't have an election. Why are we having an election?
93%. He's behind 5 points in every single swing state poll and also in the national polls. Why should we have an election?
Right. That's what he's preparing people for. You know, he
Absolutely
always says what he's going to do and then normalizes by repeating it over and over again. So he's already starting with this, why should we have an election? If he were to win, after 4 years of hearing, why should we have an election? You know, half the country is like, yeah, why should we have an election?
That's the danger, right? And then, you know, John and I have been talking about his the way he demonizes immigrants, the way that Hitler demonized the Jews. But Trump has a very complicated relationship with Jews as well, doesn't he? Listen to this clip.
And she turned down your governor. By the way, just so you understand, I know some of you probably like him. I don't think he's a good person. I don't think he's good. I don't think he's good. But they turned him down because he's Jewish, okay? That's why they turned him down. Now, we can be politically correct and not say that. I could say, well, they turned him down for various reasons. No. They turned him down because he's Jewish. That's why they turned him down. And I'll tell you this, any Jewish person that votes for her or a Democrat has to go out and have their head examined. Because if you see what's happening with Israel and Jewish people right now, there has never been a more dangerous time since the Holocaust. If you happen to be Jewish in America, there's never been anything like it. I'm seeing things, I can't even believe it. And we want to bring about unity and peace and everything else. It looks like they're going to have nothing but riots out there in Chicago.
He wants to bring about unity and peace. And yet there are good Jews and bad Jews. You know, that's how it starts, by the way. You're not anti-Semitic. You just talk about the good ones and the bad ones. Then you can take care of the bad ones.
Right. Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Because they sort of have this ambivalent, because Jews can be useful to them, right? They have big Jewish donors. And the Israel issue has brought a lot of Jews to their side, people who have a sincere concern about defending Israel's survival, have identified themselves, unfortunately, with a lot of these right-wing regimes feeling that they will be strong and protect Israel. But of course, by being so anti-peace, they're actually in the long run jeopardizing Israel's security. Because the only thing that's going to really ever make Israel secure is, and I don't know if we'll ever be able to achieve it, but the goal is to have a peace agreement so that we can live in peace. So that's the problem, is that it's not really good for Israel. It's not really good for the Jews. And the thing is, what he's obviously doing is projecting his own anti-Semitism, right?
Exactly.
He would not hire someone because they were Jewish. I don't think Kamala would do that, since she married a Jew. And is happily married to a Jew, you know, and has a wonderful relationship with his children as her stepchildren. So it's complete projection.
No, and of course Ivanka has married someone Jewish, and I think they're kosher. But I think for Trump that, you know, he was one of the good ones.
You know, ironically, we're Jewish, and a lot of people, my fellow Jews, were saying, I hope they don't pick Shapiro. This is a long-standing Jewish thing. You don't want to pick your head up too high, because then anti-Semitism might be aroused. You know, so it's like, oh, it'd be safer if we don't have a Jew on the ticket. Oh no, you know, then you think that doesn't matter? Oh, wait till you see. If Hitler were here, he'd come for you too. You know, so we've all been raised on that. You know, we don't want to put Jews too much in the spotlight, because it's going to arouse anti-Semitism. So I heard ironically a lot of Jewish people saying, I hope they won't choose him because he's Jewish. And we need to win this election. We don't need to break another glass ceiling.
But John, this has been a year where anti-Semitic actions have really skyrocketed around the world, not just in America, but in France and other places. Yeah. So I understand that rising anxiety. I don't think Shapiro was a good match for Kamala. I don't think.
Yeah.
Things with him being Jewish. I just don't think he was a good match. But in any case, well, we should go on. So, and in this clip, Trump is really happy about a very special endorsement that he received.
Viktor Orban of Hungary, Prime Minister of Hungary, they asked him pretty recently, they said, what's going on? The world is coming to an end. He said, if you want to stop it, re-elect the United States, re-elect Donald Trump, because when he was there, we didn't have any problems. We didn't have problems.
So here's our treason of the week. Viktor Orban is a Putin puppet. So he's saying he's endorsed by a Putin puppet. He's therefore announcing that he is an enemy of the United States, that he is an agent of a hostile foreign power.
Well, and it's actually even worse than him simply being a puppet. Orban has dismantled the government. He has dismantled the press. He's dismantled the universities. I saw an interview with Amna Nawaz on PBS, where she interviewed him. She's so great, and she was so strong with him. He got furious with her on the air. I mean, you could see that he could barely contain himself. The rage at being challenged by a journalist. And this is the kind of guy that Trump is proud to say endorses him.
Right. But also, again, I just marvel at the stupidity that literally, if they were wearing red and blue uniforms with numbers on them and their names, it couldn't be clearer which side these people are on. Yeah. They're on the Russian team. It's just so obvious. And it makes me realize that, look, never forget that the head of the FBI is a member of the Federalist Society. Okay. Because why is no one being prosecuted for these Russian connections? We're seeing treason in plain sight, and yet nothing is being done about it.
Just to go on to a couple of nasty things that Trump says about Kamala, which really aren't landing.
Are true. Yeah.
Have you heard her laugh? That is the laugh of a crazy person. That is the laugh of a crazy. It's the laugh of a lunatic. Have you heard it? You know, they prohibited her. They prohibited her for laughing. I've been waiting for her to laugh, because as soon as she laughs, the election's over.
You know, I want to point out something, and I've been seeing this with Trump in the last couple of years. I don't remember it so much 4 years ago. He's calling everybody crazy. Mm-hmm. He called Smith deranged. Mm-hmm. He's relying on that term lunatic in a way that makes me think that he's worried about his own mental health. Pelosi,
of course,
he's worried about his own mental health. Yeah. He's really focused on this notion of insanity. You know, the insane asylums, which are different from mental institutions. I mean, which of course isn't true. But he's focusing it on so much. It's really a go-to for him in his limited cognitive range now. Think of all the insults in 2016. You know, he didn't call Jeb Bush crazy. He called him low energy.
Right.
Like, it was much smarter. It spoke to something. No one would look at Kamala Harris and say she was crazy, or Jack Smith for that matter. There's nothing crazy about it.
Now, do you want to hear what a crazy laugh sounds like?
Sure.
That's right, folks. You just heard silence. Do you know why? Because Donald Trump is disturbed because he doesn't laugh. You've never heard Donald Trump laugh. And that's one of the sickest things about him.
And we're going to go to one more comment two more comments, but this next one is, again, it's new. You know, I told you I listen for the new things in the rallies. This is a new one.
She said Kamala has one big advantage. She's a very beautiful woman. She's a beautiful woman. So I decided to go back and reread the clause. I'm not saying he's, but I say that I am much better looking than her. I think I'm much better. Much better. I'm a better looking person than Kamala.
It drives him crazy. It drives him
does, and
crazy that she's more attractive than him.
But I don't mean to push this too hard, the whole dog whistle thing. But I think he's saying he's white. I really do.
Okay. I mean, he could be. I think, though, he's someone who has an enormous fascination with physical attractiveness and beauty. It's something he's been obsessed with his whole life. And really, he's fired people for not being attractive enough, not looking the part. He's because, he's a narcissist, for crying out loud. So, of course, he's very preoccupied with physical beauty. It's even in the diagnostic criteria, that preoccupation with physical beauty in narcissism.
Yes,
and so the reality is she's prettier than he is. That's reality. But he can't stand it. So he has to actually say, well, I think I'm actually more attractive than her. What do you think?
I still think there's something about the otherness of Kamala for him.
Yeah.
But
I'm saying it makes him crazy that she could be more attractive than him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That might make him want to reference her race more, because he's got to do something to mar her beauty. He can't accept that she is beautiful.
All right. And we have one last one. Rex?
When she sits and complains, hey, look, Joe Biden hates her, okay? Hates her. You don't mind if I go off teleprompter for a second, do you? Joe Biden hates her. This was an overthrow of a president. This was an overthrow. They went out. I spent $100 million fighting Joe Biden. They told him he couldn't win. His debate performance wasn't the best ever. But they said mine was the best ever. But they said his debate performance wasn't. I look forward to debating her, by the way. She'll be easier. She'll be easier than him.
Well, again, he's projecting.
Right. We can't imagine that there might be love between two people who were one trading off power to the other. Can't imagine. Of course, Biden hates her. And Biden, as we mentioned last time, he said was going to have a coup at the convention, which, wow, look at that. It didn't happen.
Who could have predicted that? But again, Harry, it's a projection, because we're going to talk about the loving. You're going to be talking later, I know, in a couple of minutes, about the loving relationship between Kamala and Biden. But who really does have complete and total contempt for Donald Trump? His own running mate.
I didn't vote for Trump.
I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
It makes you think that at a fundamental level, this is sort of a he said, she said, right? And at the end of the day, do you believe Donald Trump, who always tells the truth? Just kidding. Or do you believe that woman on that tape?
I cannot stand Trump because I think he's a fraud. Well, I think he's a total fraud that is exploiting these people, who is a total fraud.
Like you said, I agree with you on Trump, because I don't think that he's the person. I don't think he actually cares about folks.
So, as a conservative who thinks that Trump does not have the answers and isn't qualified to be president, what are you going to do this election, if you don't mind saying?
My current plan is to vote either.
So J.D. Vance hates Donald Trump. He has total contempt for him. He said, I don't like him. Okay, so he hates Trump. But because he's a psychopath and an opportunist, he sees his opening. He could become president through this gambit, right?
Oh, yeah.
So now he's a Trump guy. But in other words, Trump is seeing a hateful relationship between Kamala and Biden, but the true hateful relationship is between his own running mate and himself.
Well, don't forget, John, it's you who pointed out that J.D. Vance spent a year or so courting Don Jr., becoming friends with him. And it was Don Jr. who convinced Trump to endorse J.D. Vance for Senate, which J.D. Vance barely won. That's why he's having such a hard time. He's not a great candidate. And then Trump took him. And what J.D. Vance says is, Well, once I saw Trump in office, I realized what a great president he was. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So there are just a few more miscellaneous things in This Week in Trump. One thing that he got into a lot of trouble about, right, was saying that the Medal of Freedom was better than the Medal of Honor. Really, with one fell swoop, managing to just insult every veteran in America.
I couldn't believe it. I saw it live, John. I saw it live. I couldn't believe it.
And again, he's on his back foot trying to defend this comment. So let's hear that.
Many veterans are upset about that, including here in Pennsylvania.
No, I didn't hear that. I only heard when I say better, I would rather in a certain way get it because people that get the Congressional Medal of Honor, which I've given to many, are often horribly wounded or dead. They're often dead. They get it posthumously. And when you get the Congressional Medal of Honor, I always consider that to be the ultimate, but it is a painful thing to get it. When you get the Presidential Medal of Freedom, it's usually for other things, like you've achieved great success in sports or you've achieved great success someplace else. When you get the Medal of Honor, generally speaking, and I've met many of them and I've seen the families of many of them, this is an incredible honor, but it was a statement that it's much more painful to get because they're oftentimes in very bad shape. I've seen them come up and they've suffered greatly, whereas the Presidential Medal of Freedom, to my knowledge, I don't think anybody suffered other than they've worked hard and they've done great things. One's a military award, one's a civilian award, but sometimes very painful to get the other.
He didn't say it was more painful to get the other. He said it was better as he gave it to Marion Adelson, who was just a billionaire wife of a donor. I mean, it's ludicrous.
It's so heroic. It's so heroic that she gave all that money to a fascist to fund his election so that then he could cut her all these sweetheart deals. What a hero. That's better than dying on the beaches of Normandy to protect our freedom.
It's such a rookie mistake. Like, it's so crazy that he's making these mistakes. It's really disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah. And some of the logic too, though, is, well, it's better to get the Medal of Freedom because a lot of these people who get the other one, they're kind of in bad shape.
Yeah. They don't look very good.
So he's not thinking about which is more noble, which is a greater honor. He's saying, like, would you want to get, you're kind of in bad. That's not always the greatest award to get because then you're dead or you're in bad shape.
Right. It's awarded posthumously. What did he say? Posthumously.
It's posthumously to us, but
all right.
Anyway, moving on. Let's just hear another little statement that he made. That's just a little stupid thing.
Okay.
We're going to bring up electronics too. Electronics, we buy everything away. When you see the sophistication of the product I just saw at this place, electronics is peanuts by comparison. But
see, this is what I mean. He just uses these sort of large, blocky ideas. Like, he's just going to keep saying the word electronics, and of course he says, and we buy them away like it's a takeout restaurant. So that's a weird phrasing, of course. But this thing is he just says and the other thing he does with crypto too. When something's it's really complicated. Some very brilliant people have talked about it. It's electronics, it's crypto, it's complicated. He can't get beyond a word to really get a concept. So he just repeats the word in an awkward way.
Yeah, and he's slipping there too.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is the next piece of tape I'm going to show, I bring this up every week. And every week I say, there's nothing new here. I'm not giving you any new information. I'm talking about this because I've promised that I will talk about it every week because he talks about it every week. I've said that Donald Trump has malignant narcissism, a disorder that was based on Hitler and meant to apply to other similar leaders. And I believe Donald Trump is the American Hitler wannabe, and immigrants are his Jews. Let's hear what he has to say about immigrants this week.
Kamala refuses even to call these criminals, and we're not going to use the term, she said, illegal aliens. No, they are illegal aliens, but she said don't ever use that term. But they're not just illegal aliens. Honestly, they're monsters. These are savage monsters.
So immigrants are monsters. Okay. A monster is something that is subhuman, it is evil, and that needs to be destroyed in order for you to survive. Okay.
Sure.
So calling immigrants monsters is the preamble to some kind of wave of persecution. And yes, maybe even could lead to genocide. It's the language of genocide.
Well, don't forget it. At their convention, they called for the greatest deportation in history. Millions and millions of people being rounded up and ejected from the country, which, besides being a horrific and vile thing to do, would probably crash the economy, given all those people are working. But the whole thing is really despicable.
And they're not all just going to be deported, Harry. Millions of them are going to be kept in concentration camps.
Yeah.
He's already made plans to build out huge camps in the desert. Okay.
Right.
And I remind people, concentration camps and death camps are not the same thing. I'm not saying he's planning death camps, so I wouldn't put it past him. But a concentration camp is when you basically imprison a population of people to concentrate them away from the general population. And so I am saying, we think about Nazi Germany. How could people have allowed millions of their neighbors to be carted away and taken to camps? Well, you know what? If Donald Trump is elected, he's going to cart millions of your neighbors away to camps, and you're probably not going to do anything about it, to be honest. Okay. So that's how it happens. So, Harry, one of the things that we've been criticized about is diagnosing Donald Trump from a distance. But as you know, as a mental health professional, there's a number of different ways that we make diagnoses. And one of them is by speaking to informants who know the subject very well and can speak to their behavior and their frame of mind. So here is Stephanie Grisham at the convention talking about Donald Trump, who she knows very well.
Well, she was his last press secretary.
Behind closed doors, Trump mocks his supporters. He calls them basement dwellers. On a hospital visit one time when people were dying in the ICU, he was mad that the cameras were not watching him. He has no empathy, no morals, and no fidelity to the truth. He used to tell me, "It doesn't matter what you say, Stephanie. Say it enough and people will believe you." But it does matter. What you says matter, and what you don't say matters. On January 6th, I asked Melania if we could at least tweet that while peaceful protest is the right of every American, there's no place for lawlessness or violence. She replied with one word: no.
So there's the diagnostic criteria for a narcissistic sociopath.
She listed them.
Yeah.
No, it's really I'm very brave of her to come to the convention and give that speech. Now we're going to talk about psychological health in contrast to Trump. But I was watching Morning Joe and John Heilman was on, and he's starting to say the things that John and I have been wanting the press to say. In fact, John has made efforts over the past several years talking to producers at CNN and MSNBC to talk about raising this issue of Trump's dementia, and they keep shutting you down. Well, now we have a major journalist, who I particularly respect. And after I saw this on Morning Joe, I had to wait for a YouTube version to come up so I could find the clip. It's short, but Heilman is talking about how Trump was backpedaling on January 6th. And then he said this.
Of all the things that have happened in the last month with Trump, where we have seen him in a state of strategic flailing, and I have said, I keep saying it over and over again, it's just evident that his mental acuity and his cognitive state is, in addition to his psychic state, but his cognitive state is really becoming much more starkly evident how far he's failing and falling.
So this is great, Harry. The mainstream press is starting to talk about his cognitive decline. So look, better late than never.
Absolutely. No, it's really happening. And Heilman is just so astute, I think, was able to explain, to describe that so succinctly, but in a way, devastatingly, I think. It just is like we're now noticing it.
So we've just spent 50 minutes talking about psychopathology and Trump and Vance. Now we'd actually like to talk about health and normality in the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz campaign.
Well, I've been making the argument that Trump depends on people identifying with his sense of being a victim and identifying with his rageful re-seizing of power. But we're seeing on the other side a very open, emotionally expressive, affectionate, happy experience that's happening on the other side, which I think is really affecting the audiences. We're going to start with this clip. You can't fake that. You cannot fake that. It's so moving. And it wasn't even on mic. It was just
she's saying, "I love you."
No, and the way that she's hugging him, it's I'm very moved by it. And then let's go to Biden's farewell address from Monday night.
Nowhere else in the world could a kid with a stutter and modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, grow up to sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. That's because America is and always has been a nation of possibilities. Possibilities. We must never lose that. Never. Kamala and Tim understand that this nation must continue to be a place of possibilities, not just for the few of us, but for all of us. But join me in promising your whole heart to this effort, and where my heart will be. I promise I'll be the best volunteer Harris and Walz has ever seen. Each of us has a part in the American story. For me and my family, there's a song that means a lot to us, that captures the best of who we are as a nation. The song is called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, and I can't sing worth a damn, so I'm not going to try. I'll just quote it. The work and prayers of centuries have brought us to this day. What shall our legacy be? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. But I gave my best to you. For 50 years, like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation. And I've been blessed a million times in return with the support of the American people. I've either been too young to be in the Senate because I wasn't 30 yet, and too old to stay as president. But I hope you know how grateful I am to all of you. I can honestly say, and I mean this from the bottom, give you my word as a Biden, I can honestly say I'm more optimistic about the future than I was when I was elected as a 29-year-old United States Senator. I mean it. Folks, we just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. There's nothing we cannot do when we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
look at all the love in that room, but also his saying, I'm going to be your best volunteer. It feels very, very sincere. And also, I'm glad he mentioned the thing about the stutter. We were talking about that on this show, that a lot of what really made him look worse than he was in terms of his performances, that he's had this lifelong stutter. And that, as we had Eric Jackson on as an expert who said that as he's aged, his ability to control the stutter has gotten worse. So I'm glad he mentioned his disability and how, a young boy with a stutter was able to rise to become president.
I also think, no, I agree with you, but I was really, you see the Waltzes getting tearful.
Yes, I wanted to mention that too.
I thought it was beautiful. And also, beautiful. I just want to remind people, Trump said that Joe Biden was dumb, couldn't put two words together, isn't really president. The people around the desk are all doing it. The vicious disrespect and portrait of Biden that Trump had to create because of his own narcissistic injuries, right? That the other person has to be terrible. It's all beaten down if you just watch that speech. It's genuine, it's authentic, you can feel it. You can feel his sorrow as well as his generosity. You can feel what it means to say goodbye after 50 years in politics. I just think it was wonderful.
It was beautiful. And actually, I'm again sensitive to the people who are listening and not watching. I'm glad you mentioned Walz tearing up. It was very, again, even good actors can't cry on cue that easily. This was very sincere. They showed two signs of his crying. And by the way, speaking about crying, those of you who've been watching the convention as I have obsessively, or even watched the highlights, you've probably seen that scene of Tim Walz's son crying, and saying, that's my dad. I have to admit, during that moment, I cried. Okay. When I was watching the convention and, his son was so tears streaming down his face, stands up, is clapping for his dad, and keeps pointing, that's my dad. That's my dad. I mean, Harry, as a parent, right? How could that not make you cry to think of a child being that filled up, right? With joyous admiration for their parent. It's just such a human moment. Well, guess what the conservatives did on Twitter? They took pictures of this young boy's crying for his father and said, oh, look at this. Not weird, huh? Not weird, huh?
Do we have a bit of that or what?
Actually, I saw that tweet right before we went on the air, and I wanted to add it, but like our poor producer Rex, we just burdened him with so much graphics that I thought I would just verbally describe it to you. But I think it's really, again, how they pathologize health, how they pathologize normality. Right? Oh, people who laugh, people who love, what pathetic little weaklings. They must be so embarrassed.
I know, no, it's terrible. Well, we have one more. You have one more clip? Yep. All right, let's see this one.
Well, trust me, Milwaukee, a hell of a lot can change in 4 weeks. You run a campaign based on fear like them, you're going to run into a little trouble when you run into a campaign that's based on joy. These guys are focused on the past, like the 1850s past. This campaign's focused on your future. We're not going back. Wow. Wow. Here's the deal. That convention had one purpose, to coronate one man. Ours, by the way, they got a little party going over in Chicago. They didn't know the big party was here in Milwaukee tonight, so this is where it's at. It's not a celebration of a coronation of one man over there. It's a celebration of all of us over there. I don't imagine anybody will pay any attention, but when I came out here, you might have heard over there, that convention and the energy over there is like nothing you've seen. But here's what I'm really excited about. Not only do we have massive energy at our convention, we got a hell of a lot more energy at where they had their convention right here.
Yeah, if people don't know that, so this was beautiful double programming. So Tim Walz and Kamala are in the same place where the Republicans held their convention. They filled that place massively, and the stadium in Chicago. I mean, talk about trying to go after the crowd size envy that Trump suffers from.
Yes. Well, so now we're going to be introducing our guest. Ben Michaelis is a Ph.D. He's a psychologist. He's a forensic psychologist. And the reason that we're having him on this show is he participated in a very interesting experiment. Stat is a magazine. Some of you may not be familiar with it. It's sort of a scientific magazine that has very interesting research and scholarly articles, but aimed at normal people. And they did a study. Actually, they repeated a study, and Dr. Michaelis was actually part of both waves of the study. I remember the Stat article in 2017 by Sharon Begley, where she had a group of experts. She didn't say who they were, but she had a group of experts read speeches that Trump had done early in his career in the 80s and ones that he had done in 2017. And the group came to the conclusion that there was cognitive deterioration or signs of potential cognitive deterioration. Well, at Stat, they repeated that experiment again, and Dr. Michaelis was one of the experts. So let's just take a look at that article. Trump keeps losing his train of thought. Cognitive experts have theories about why. Michaelis, who also reviewed Trump's speaking style for Stat in 2017 and showed how it had become significantly less sophisticated over decades, said the most important change in the past 7 years is Trump's increasing digressions and speeches that don't stay on topic, which he explained can be an indication of diminished cognitive ability. Quote, tangentiality certainly amped up, and it's difficult to follow him, Michaelis said. Quote, you'd expect some cognitive diminishment. Of course, he's 78 years old. If he was your grandfather, you wouldn't expect anything different. He just happens to be running for president. Although Michaelis said he couldn't offer a formal diagnosis, he did say Trump's speaking style was a cause for concern. Quote, there's reasonable evidence suggestive of forms of dementia, he said. The reduction in complexity of sentences and vocabulary does lead you to a certain picture of cognitive diminishment. Dr. Michaelis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on the show, sincerely.
Great to have you.
And you know, I remember that article in 2017 by Sharon Begley. I was quoting that article a lot. And so I was so excited to see that there was a sequel. I didn't know that you had participated in both.
I did the formal analysis, or was part of the formal analysis in 2017, looking at clips from when Trump was in his 40s to when he was in his early 70s at that time. And I mean, if you've seen that, there's no question, right, in terms of the sentence structure, in terms of the use of vocabulary. And I mean, he was, when he was in his 40s, he was very articulate, very sharp. And there was the difference between those was quite significant. And you know, this was to be fair, was less of a formal study than we did in 2017. I was looking at a series of clips, and one of the things that I said to the author Olivia Goldhill when we were talking through it was, look, there are definitely some differences. The thing that I wanted to make sure to be very clear about is there was a lot of focus on word substitution and things of that nature. And I think it's a little bit of a red herring. I don't want to put too much on that. I think that the most important thing is actually to look at the sort of trend of thought, that he's really unable to sort of hold on to a trend of thought for a long period of time. And as I'm sure both of you know, there's a whole range of that in people with formal thought disorders and what have you.
Yes.
No, I've had other experts have emphasized that too, that in some ways maybe we can be too picky looking at the phonemic paraphasias, or maybe some of a little bit of a gotcha, but the overall trend of the tangentiality, the difficulty in completing a thought, the meandering, the things that don't make sense, that just seem to be free associations.
Precisely. There really is more of, moving from kind of linear thinking, which was evident when he was younger, to less linear thinking, to now, more circumstantiality. Sort of, he could get very detailed in his speech, and then get derailed, then, eventually come back to the topic, tangentiality, sometimes never returning. And at points, this sort of almost like a looseness of association that again, I'm not diagnosing him, but that when you're working in with more severely disturbed individuals that you tend to see, I mean, at the most extreme, this is more of a informal term that I'm sure both of you know, like word salad is the most extreme, where there's just words being thrown up and they don't really, there's no association.
Right. This is more like I'm trying to think of it. What would be between a salad and an entree?
And a moose-bouche?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't pull the analogy through. I tried.
If only.
Yeah.
I just have a couple of comments. First of all, what we showed on some previous John calls our shows sessions, of some previous sessions, was Trump digressing and then saying, "You see, I'm a genius. I'm going to come back." So he would catch himself doing and then rationalize. But it's even worse, I think, lately. And I mentioned this last week, but I've been watching one of the rallies because I watched them all the way through. But for fun, I skipped every minute and a half, and they were all different. I mean, within 30 seconds, he's going somewhere else. And it didn't used to be that way. He used to be able to elaborate and develop ideas. He's not doing it anymore. He's gumming together ideas.
Indeed. And the thing that you mentioned, and which I think is really important, look, he is I was listening to the earlier segment, listening to the two of you talk a little bit about finally there is now a increased focus on some of Trump's obvious cognitive diminishment, and that wasn't happening, frankly, when Biden was in the race, and that was, say whatever you want to say about that. Now that you have this severe contrast, right, between someone who just can't stay on topic, he can't stay on message. All the evidence indicates, again, this is from the reporting, that his line of attack should be pretty logical, and he doesn't seem to be able to do it. And he has these sort of, will go on these tangents and the nicknames and all. I mean, he's an entertainer, really. Like he's an entertainer.
I'm glad you mentioned him being an entertainer, because I think that's one of the ways he's been able to hide these, what I would call gross cognitive deficits. And my wife thought one of the funniest things I said he does improv with himself. In improv, whatever the person says, you just go with it. So if someone says, "Oh, I see all these monkeys outside." "Oh, it's early in the year for monkeys." I mean, you just go with it, right? And so whatever crazy thing comes out of his mouth, like the late great Hannibal Lecter, right? Instead of being embarrassed, because of course he's brazen and he's incapable of being embarrassed, he actually does the opposite. He doubles down on it. He acts like it's cool, like, "Oh, they don't want me to talk about Hannibal Lecter, the great." But it's crazy. But the point is, he somehow has this way as an entertainer of making this look good.
Look, I want to say one thing, and I hate to even give him a compliment, but I'm going to give him a compliment.
Go for it.
Yeah.
When he was, when during the assassination attempt, there was this moment that after the shooting, he had
yes.
the instinct, I'm not going to say the wherewithal, the instinct to stand up and raise his fist.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like that was instinct. You know, you're in shock, really.
Yeah.
And that is a I don't know what you want to say, but rare gift to be able to like have that, because that shot was worth, you know, so much for them.
Oh yeah, that's when we thought we were dead. We thought we were dead after that.
No, exactly. And we're old enough to remember, you know, Ronald Reagan surviving an assassination attempt, and he was never stronger politically afterwards. I really like what you're saying, but I also want to about the showman, because you're absolutely right. The ability to connect with the audience in the way that he does is not something that's been diminished by his cognitive decline. So when you see him in softball interviews, or listen, that rally that I was showing clips from took place in the late afternoon in Wilkes-Barre. And in the opening, man, was he charming. He warmed up the audience. He talked to the local people who were there, the local, you know, state people. And he really hears the audience. He knows when he's losing them. He has all the instincts of someone who can hold a room. It's just that he's losing the ability to think in elaborate or complex ways. And it's starting to show. At least that's how I'm seeing it. Does that make sense to you?
Losing or lost, but yes. And it's really the only question. But look, the way in which he's honed his messaging, if you can call it that, but certainly when he was in 2015, and, you know, look, I was very outspoken. That's part of why I got involved with STAT and what have you. I was very concerned to see the sort of obvious. It was like so obvious it wasn't even interesting in some ways. The narcissistic tendencies, and that you give someone the throne of power and how dangerous that is, obviously. And so I was very, much out there at that time. But if you watched his messaging, then he really sort of like looks at what works, feels what works with the crowd, and he's like, all right, that's going to be my message. I'm going to keep, that's the nicknames come from that. It's like he gets the positive reinforcement from the crowd. He's like, okay, I got this. And it's like frankly, it's like a comedian, right? Comedians do this over and over and over and over again.
Bill Maher says he's a comedian. He just says he's doing shtick. Although it's a weird kind of autocratic version of comedy, I guess.
Take my country, please.
Very dark comedy. Let's put it that way.
Well, actually, we're using these technical terms, but obviously not everyone understands them. I wonder if we could just back up a little bit. You're talking about his tangentiality. Maybe just explain to the audience what tangentiality means.
Sure. So someone that is, again, these all exist on a spectrum, and it's not perfectly linear, but someone that is, when we're talking, you expect that we're going to stay relatively on topic. We may digress here or there, but we're generally following a certain line. That I would consider to be linear thinking. You both know that when you are evaluating someone for their cognitive functioning, that is one of the first things you look for. Can they remain linear? And then sort of going down the line, you go to circumstantiality, where again, they digress more, that sort of the variance is wider, but they eventually return to the topic at hand. Okay, so that's like would be one step away. Then tangentiality is like kind of a continuous diversion. They're continuously diverting. There's really no actual return to that former line of linearity. You go a little further, there's just kind of real looseness of associations, where the person is just changing to, sort of like you were saying, you were watching them, and every few minutes you're like, what is he talking about? And then there's like derailment, which is like really almost like unrelated thoughts that are coming right after each other, to a flight of ideas where, a person jumps from topic to topic. There's no discernible associations where you tend to see someone that's like in acute mania, in a manic state, will have that kind of flight of ideas. And then, as we mentioned earlier, kind of this sort of word salad, which you often tend to see with someone with, with dementia, people that are in, florid psychotic states, someone with schizophrenia, someone with lesions to their Wernicke's area. And it's just completely incoherent. And so that's really what, that's what I was getting at.
So in the article, I think I quoted you as saying, I'm not diagnosing him, but the signs are consistent with dementia. So without asking you to diagnose him, could you just elaborate a little more what it was that led you to make the statement that what you were observing was consistent with the diagnosis of dementia?
It really is. It's all of it in totality. But being able to, that the someone that is having impairment, potentially even immediate memory impairment, they're losing their way. They're losing their way. And as you said a few moments ago, part of his gift and his ability to kind of cover, which, people that are often suffering from dementia, they do cover. They often will be very careful either to not speak because they don't want to reveal that they have dementia. But part of his gift as an entertainer is that he's able to be like, that's what I meant when I was talking about sharks, like electrocuted sharks. And you're like, but the crowd, he's dynamic and he's compelling. And that's part of why when you were looking at Joe Biden comparatively, who has a stutter, who, to my knowledge, doesn't do a lot of the things that, to my knowledge, Trump does to preserve his physical appearance, so he appears younger. The tanning, all the whitening, all those things that give an illusion of someone that's younger, and his like kind of natural gifts as an entertainer. He's like, yeah, that's what I meant, and the fact that he's often playing to people that are, look, let's put it this way, guys. Walt Disney, whatever you want to say about Walt Disney, would say, look, I like the lines at my amusement parks because it makes people appreciate the rides more, right? They have to wait longer, right? That's genius showmanship right there. But when you come to his rallies, people like drive for miles, for hours. Are you really not going to be satisfied with the headliner? You've just spent $70 on merchandise with his name on it. You are lined up to ensure that you are part of the cult of personality.
And you hang around in the stadium for 3 hours until he speaks. So there's this whole networking that's going on. You're making friends, and there are people who go to every rally. They drive around in their cars to follow him.
It's like the Grateful Dead, except they're he's the ungrateful alive. I want to get back to what we were saying about how this all kind of comes together sort of seamlessly. And I think the Hannibal Lecter moment is a great example. He's starting out in that speech where he first introduces the late great Hannibal Lecter. He starts out by saying, they're not sending their best. They're sending them from lunatic asylums. And these are the worst. And a lunatic asylum makes him think about a movie he saw about a lunatic asylum. Because after he's talking about the immigrants coming from the lunatic asylums, he goes, has anybody seen Silence of the Lambs? Like,
he didn't
completely
even do
random.
That. He didn't even do that. He just went right into Hannibal Lecter.
No, he asked if anyone had seen Silence of the Lambs. He asked
the first time he told it, he didn't.
Well, anyway, I think he did. But anyway.
I think it's more severe. It's more severe, John.
Right. But so an asylum makes him think of a movie about asylum, and then he goes, the late great Hannibal Lecter. Okay, now first of all, saying the late Hannibal Lecter implies that he was a living person who died.
Precisely.
So he's now gone from a loose association about insane asylums to a movie about an insane asylum to a fictional character who was in an insane asylum, now making him a living character who is deceased. And also because he's so perverse, making him the great Hannibal Lecter, as if some sort of vicious serial killer is, someone that we would memorialize or idealize, but only if you're a malignant narcissist. So that's more of a psychodynamic view into his twisted mind, right? But that kind of, and then what he does with it is now he's talking about the late great Hannibal Lecter in every speech, because it's like an applause line, it's a joke, it's a gag, right? So he's taken something that was literally a demonstration of a demented thought process, and he's making it into a gag, a recurrent gag.
That's what he's doing. It's how he covers.
Look, if he was just on The Apprentice still, you'd have to admire it. The problem is that he's running for the most powerful position, certainly in this country, maybe in the world, depending on your perspective. And really, does the notion of service is it's so through the looking glass. It's so through the looking glass that there's nothing service oriented about this man, nor has there ever been. And the idea that he is going to look, from your clinical work, when someone is tormented by someone with narcissistic personality disorder, and my feeling is our country was tormented by a person with narcissistic personality disorder, and we're this constant traumatizing and people looking at the news and death scrolling, all the doom scrolling, forgive me, and one of the things that I found so fascinating was when the Access Hollywood tape came out. I'm sorry if I'm going to. I don't mean to digress either. I apologize.
Go for it. No.
I don't want to be accused of voiced by my own petard. But
when you start talking about the late great fictional characters, we'll have to bring the hook and take you off air.
Yeah.
There's such a thing as healthy digressions, don't you think?
Okay. Well, but when the Access Hollywood tape came out, the person that took the brunt of that was Billy Bush. He was the one that took the brunt of it. Now, I'm not defending him at all, but I was like, he didn't say the things. The person that said it was really a very, frankly, it's a disorienting moment.
Yeah, he's so shameless about his moral bankruptcy that he can just basically be shameless now about his cognitive deterioration. It's like his shamelessness is a kind of superpower in this perverse way.
Well put. That's exactly right.
Harry, do you have any more questions for Dr. Michaelis?
I don't, but it's so great to have you on. I'd like to.
I'm very glad you came on. I was really glad to get you. Seriously, because that article was so important. I really wanted to have someone to represent the work that you did in that article. So I'm really grateful that you came.
Well, thank you for having me on, both of you. I appreciate the work that both of you do. I hope that you are well, and hopefully good things in the future for everyone.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thanks for coming. Bye-bye. Well, Harry, I guess we've gotten to the shrink wrap portion of our show, and I think this time you want to do something a little different.
Yes, but John, you've got to ask me the important question.
I forgot to ask. There's only one question. I don't even like there's 4 questions. There's only one question.
I just said one question.
Yeah, just one question. What did we learn? What did we learn this week?
There we go. Well, we're going to do something different this week with shrink wrap, because there was a clip from the convention that I wanted to play, because I thought it didn't just explain what's happening or the importance of psychological health, it demonstrated it.
We live in a time of such confusion and rancor, with a culture that puts a premium on things that don't last. Money, fame, status, likes. We chase the approval of strangers on our phones. We build all manner of walls and fences around ourselves, and then we wonder why we feel so alone. We don't trust each other as much because we don't take the time to know each other. And in that space between us, politicians and algorithms teach us to caricature each other and troll each other and fear each other. But here's the good news, Chicago. All across America, in big cities and small towns, away from all the noise, the ties that bind us together are still there. We still coach Little League and look out for our elderly neighbors. We still feed the hungry in churches and mosques and synagogues and temples. We share the same pride when our Olympic athletes compete for the gold. Because the vast majority of us do not want to live in a country that's bitter and divided.
I'm so moved by Obama. And, you know, he and Michelle both gave extraordinary speeches. And I noticed that the women commentators on television were blown away by her. And understandably, she's one of the great orators of her time. But Obama has always held a special place for me. I remember when he was a senator and he used to have a podcast where every Wednesday afternoon he would turn on the recorder and just talk about what he did that week. This is before people were following him. And I think his ability to speak to our emotional and psychological experience, and he's right, what's happened with social media is there is a way in which we are more alone, more isolated. You know, there's all this kind of friendship we have with people online that's a kind of shallow intimacy, right? Mm-hmm. And he's speaking,
a great line.
Right? And he's speaking directly to it. And he's describing that there is underlying our loneliness, the distance between us. There's still the connection. There's still the community connection between people. And I've been arguing at the end of this show for the past month that what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are doing is offering a different kind of psychological engagement with the audience that easily puts down what Trump is offering. For Trump, he gets the audience to identify with his anger and his ridiculing people and feeling superior to people. That's why people who love Trump love him. And he says, I'll take care of things. I'm strong. I'll be fine. But he does it with aggression. And when he was running against Biden, who was looking weak because of his age, not because of his cognitive problems, because of his age, Trump's rage and anger was winning.
Yeah. Now,
what Kamala and Tim are doing, and which Obama explained and demonstrated. So not only was Obama talking about the distance, he was closing the distance by naming it. He always moves me when he speaks. And Obama, there were great speeches he gave in his life, and this was the bookend to the one in 2004, when he said, "We're not blue states and red states. We're the United States." And so I felt like it was important for me to close the show with that moment of his, and for all of you to really keep track of the way that this Democratic campaign is reaching people, because they're going to reach it with psychological health. And you know what psychological health is? It's an openness to all of your feelings, not just aggressive feelings, but compassion, vulnerability, love, happiness. If you have those range of feelings available to you, people like John and I, who are professionals, would consider you to be psychologically healthy. And we're going to see that win over the other side.
No, I think that's beautiful, Harry, and I think you're right. And I think in some ways, look, in this whole show and this whole movement, we've used our authority as mental health professionals to say, look, this guy, Trump, is really, really, really sick. And let me explain the reasons why. But we also then have the authority to define the opposite side of the coin, which is what Obama is describing as really, really, really healthy. And let us explain the reasons why. Our guest said that we've all been in an abusive relationship with Donald Trump. We've been in a sick relationship with a sick, sadistic, gaslighting narcissist. And we need to go to the battered voters shelter and escape this man and learn to live in a healthy object relationship again. And so what I think you're saying is health is contagious. It's attractive. People, if you show them the contrast between sickness and health, more people are going to want to choose health.
Health wins every time. It just does.
So Harry, I really appreciate your helping us to really see this idealistic vision, this aspirational vision that we can all identify with. And really, it helps us to go higher. And, Harry, you are the kind of person, that's one of the things I like about you. You go high. You go high, Harry. But, when you go high, I just feel like I have to go low. So what I got out of this week was a little less lofty. What I got out of this week is our Psy-Op is working. Our Psy-Op is working, and just keep hitting him and hitting him and hitting him again. He was a football coach. Hit him again, harder. Well, Coach Walz would agree with me.
It's moments like these that make me feel like I'm channeling Dan Rowan. To those in the audience who know about it. But John, it's always a pleasure being.
You bet your bippy.
It's always a pleasure being part of a two-man team, I must say. Folks, thank you for joining us. We had such a blast. We hope to see you next week. Our show drops every Friday. Tell your friends. It's called Shrinking Trump.